this point. I went through the paces. I guess, actually, to tell you the truth, I want to tell you a really quick story.
Whose phone is on, first of all? And then tell us the story. Oh, okay.
No,
I keep on looking at this guy being...
It only bings when I make a key point, just so you know.
You're making a lot of key points.
Yeah. So,
cheers.
And we are live. The Tap Takeover Podcast, powered by Shepherd Express. This episode, we're up at the Fermentorium in Cedarburg. Get ready for some amazing IPAs as we speak with head brewer Karl and the head of marketing Mitch. Stay tuned for beer news and a special tasting of the bourbon barrel aged version of Divine Sanctuary. But first, we've got a side-by-side tasting of Bootlegger's Mark in two varieties. Both the American whiskey and then a rye whiskey version. This is an Imperial Stout that packs a punch.
Jim, I can't wait to try these beers. They've been sitting in my cellar since April when I picked them up at the Divine Sanctuary release party. This brewery is fantastic because they do a release every Thursday. That's a big part of the interview and a big part of the information that we're giving to our listeners. But yeah, these Bootlegger's Mark series, I'm extremely excited to try. So we've got one that's whiskey barrel aged and one that is rye barrel aged. And let's see, first impressions, guys. Can you tell a little bit of a difference between the two?
Well, on the nose, I guess I didn't get much of a difference, but the rye does have that bite that you're a fan of, I think. But I think it's a little bit too much. I do like the whiskey one.
I'm a big fan, actually.
Yeah,
I'm extremely pleased with both of these beers. I mean, the whiskey barrel one is traditional stout done right, aged for a perfect amount of time, even with laying down in your cellar. And the rye barrel one is, you are correct, Jesus and Alex, that bite is perfect. It's just a perfect bite. Delicious, delicious beverage.
Yeah, and I gotta agree with you there, Andy, because this is a non-adjunct stout, right? So, I mean, a lot of the big BBAs today are super adjunct to the max. Here we've got Imperial Stout, just showing its character in the different barrels, and it's really a show off the barrels. And there's a distinct difference between these two.
Oh, definitely. The whiskey version is, I think it's got a little more sweetness. And like you said, Jesus, the rye definitely packs a little more of a spicy punch. I'm sure you're getting that from the rye barrel. Both really good. I tend to favor the rye, but I tend to favor the rye whiskeys as well. So that may just be a personal bias.
So let's kind of go with, the first impressions are obviously the nose. What do you think of the nose on both of them?
Well, I'm getting plenty of barrel across both of them, and that's really goes to show the kind of expertise that they're showing up there in Fermentorium and making their beers.
Can you tell the difference? See, when I smelled them both, I thought they smelled pretty darn close. They smelled the same to me.
Yeah, I think that's fair. I think they both smell pretty much the same on the nose. It's just there's a different flavor complexity when you get into the beers.
Oh, yeah. Once you get that taste, that's when you start. But sometimes you start to smell the difference, because that's part of the taste process.
It is. But I agree with you. You do get the same nose. But the whiskey barrel one is, you definitely taste the mash of the whiskey. And that's where that sweetness is coming from. It's just fantastic.
I do like the sweetness of that whiskey. Yeah.
And the fact that they were able to get these big flavors at only 9%. I mean, that sounds a little crazy, only 9%. But, when you're drinking some of the big stouts as we have just recently, when they're getting up into the 11, 12, I mean, you're talking worldwide stout up into the 18% region. It can get a little crazy and really complex. The fact that they were able to hit some of those very complex notes at only 9%, I'm pretty impressed. How about you guys?
Yeah, I'm very impressed. And really, there is still some hotness on this. I think it could lay down a little bit more, even being at 9%. But it really shows off the characters of the barrels. But that's what I really like.
The hotness is on that rye one. I think the other one's pretty smooth. The whiskey, yeah, I think it's smooth. I like it. I drink it. I mean, drink it now. The other one, yeah, I guess you can lie down just to smooth it out a little, but the whiskey's ready now.
Yeah,
I'm glad we're drinking it now.
And these have been laying down since April, so they probably came out a little bit hotter when they first came out, which I think was actually back in December is when these guys came out. So fantastic beer to start off our episode. We're looking forward to this Divine Sanctuary, also aged in bourbon barrels. We're going to have that at the end of the episode for you guys, and lots of beer in between, as we normally do. We're going to have a live tasting on this episode. We're going to sit down with the fellas at the Fermentorium and just talk about what what they do up in Cedarburg, which is pretty fun stuff. I think it's time to hear from the brewers themselves about what we're supposed to be drinking. So let's get right into the interview. Welcome back to the Tap Takeover Podcast. We have a special interview for you guys here. We're sitting in Cedarburg, Wisconsin, so we've taken the show on the road, and we're sitting down with head brewer Karl Wendtlandt and media director Mitch Bushner here at the Fermentorium. How are you guys doing?
I'm good.
Yeah, I'm fantastic.
We got a couple beers here. I think life is good.
So this is a pretty fun day to come up here because you guys do a special release every Thursday. We're sitting here on a Thursday. What's the special release today?
We got the Tangerine Ale that we just released. So we've got a little Sabco 10-gallon pilot batch that we brew on a fairly regular basis, enough to the point that we can actually release a new beer every single Thursday. This week we got the Tangerine Ale that was released. It's a really good beer. It's a really interesting beer. Have you guys ever had a kumquat before?
Yeah, I once owned a kumquat.
Yeah, it's a bizarre little fruit, citrus fruit, and when you eat it, it's got a bit of a numbness that it leaves on the back of your tongue, like a pithiness that it leaves on the back of your tongue. Kind of got the same sensation when I tasted this beer. So, I mean, it's like a juicy, fruity, 5% alcohol, easy drinking brew. You get a lot of tangerine aroma in it. You get a lot of tangerine flavor with it. It's hazy, it's golden in color, but then on the back end, it's got a bit of like a numbing sensation that comes from all the tangerine that we used in it. So it's delicious.
Awesome. Well, we'll have to give that one a taste while we're here today. We always like to ask our brewers, just to kind of get into things, what was kind of your beer journey? You know, what were you drinking before you became a brewer, and what kind of are you getting into these days?
Well, I guess I can field that one. What was I drinking? Gosh.
What weren't you drinking?
Wisconsin native, went to UW Milwaukee, so needless to say, we have a beer culture. We're stuck in the thick of it. Yeah, I mean, I've always had a passion for trying new beers and everything else. I mean, obviously you take the good and the bad and the everything else. I mean, you know, back in the day, I went through the Miller Reds and the St. Pauli Girls and all the other, you know, the imports and everything else, and went through that phase of no fruit in my beer and all that other stuff. But I mean, needless to say, once you experience certain things, you kind of branch out a little bit more. And really, I guess the beers that I personally seek out, the ones that are mostly true to style, or otherwise things that are totally out of style. But I hate beers that are mislabeled. I think the craft beer culture has really caught on to that, and that's why you get triple pale ales and, well, it's not a triple pale ale, whatever. I mean, you can call it whatever the heck you want. And I think that a lot of people have kind of caught on to that. And what I like is just, once again, a beer that's represented well and well executed. So, I mean, we're fortunate enough to have a ton of supply of really good beers out there in the market right now. But sometimes you have to weed through the not so great ones, and sometimes you get the hits, you get the misses, but when you find some of those hits, I mean, it's so gratifying. And I mean, it really kind of opens up your eyes to what is going on in the craft beer culture and the things that you can actually do with fermentation. And I mean, it's really exciting to be at this point where we are right now.
So getting out of the St. Pauli Girls and the Millers and everything, was there a certain style or a certain brand of beer that kind of got you into the craft brewing industry?
How many times are you going to hear Sam Calgione's name? I mean, it's
Dogfish Head.
Yeah, I mean, he was an inventor. He was resurrecting old beer styles. He was just creating new ways of creating the tried and true beer styles that we've always known. I really fell deep into the craft beer scene in 2006 when I actually went out to Dogfish Head Brewery. And I mean, we did the VIP experience. We went through the whole brewery. We stayed at the Inn at Canal Square in the Dogfish Head suite, all that other good stuff, you know, so you get the full experience. But I mean, that's really when I was like, I'm going to do this with the rest of my life. So, I mean, it's something that's been constantly developing. And I mean, I've worked in so many different aspects of the industry, as far as from wholesale and retail, and then, you know, obviously the brewing and working for other breweries and everything else. But yeah, really, I think that Dogfish Head is what started it out for me. I mean, it's big boast for Sam right there, but yeah, I mean, he makes some solid beers, and I mean, he's a pioneer. So,
how about you, Mitch? What kind of beer got you into the craft brewing?
I did the same thing. I was at UW Milwaukee for college, and it all begins with really dingy basement parties in 150-year-old houses that it's just musty and it smells, and we're drinking your Keystone Light and your Natty Light, and it was just, you know, that's what I thought beer was for a while. Craft beer movement has been around. It's existed here in Milwaukee for quite some time, since since 85 when Sprecher first came around. Soon after, Lakefront came around in 87. And I didn't know the concept. I didn't understand the concept of the different beer styles that were out there. And I was just kind of going down the line and tasting a couple things here and there, and most of them were ambers. And then I got to Lakefront's IPA, tasted that, and it was really something special that happened. If I could just go into a very short story, my grandma, when I was a kid, always had grapefruit juice in her house. And every time I'd go to her house, I'd kind of made that association that every time I go to my grandma's house, I get to drink grapefruit juice. And I ended up loving grapefruit juice, and obviously I love my grandma. And when I tasted Lakefront IPA for the first time, it was like sending me back to being 10 years old and tasting grapefruit juice with my grandma, because I hadn't had grapefruit juice in years. How often do you drink grapefruit juice, right? It's kind of where the initial love of IPAs came out to me, and from there it just stemmed off. And now, I mean, any style of craft beer at this point in my life is, something special. Some are obviously better than others, and I appreciate and I seek out the ones that are better than others, but Lakefront IPA was actually the first thing that really sparked that for me.
But no, that's really important, though. They say that the memory that lasts longest in the brain is the sensory memory of smell and taste. Being able to be transported back to, your grandma's kitchen by drinking a beer at a brewery or something, that's
it's a
incredible.
Special thing.
It's very incredible.
Yeah.
So one question we love to ask our brewers, all of our brewers on our podcast, is if you could take over the taps at the Tap Takeover Podcast in a really creative way, as a way to kind of tell the story of your brewery, picking certain beers from your brewery's list to kind of tell the evolution of your brewery. If you could take over the taps at the Tap Takeover Podcast, which beers would you choose to take over those taps?
Start with Hefeweiss, Golden Spiral. I know what you're going to say. I know what you're going to go to, but you got to start with Hefeweiss, Golden Spiral, because this brewery was built for that beer.
With our tagline, preserving tradition and unleashing imagination, we have to kind of stick to some of the traditional styles. I absolutely love our Oktoberfest and our Frühlingsbock. They're our spring and our fall seasonal. If I ever had them both at the same time, I would totally drink them both always at the same time. I brew beers that I like. So really, juice packets, man, that has to show up. That has to show up.
That's a flagship beer, for sure.
Well, it really has become that. It never really was intended on being that. We brewed a pilot batch of it. And it was just because I like that style of beer. Very citrus forward, super easy drinking, very palatable. You can have multiples, and you don't have like super crazy reflux or anything else like that as a result of it. Definitely our more traditional styles, and then, rainbows and lollipops too. I love our IPAs. Our IPAs are spot on in my personal opinion, but I brew them to my flavor profile. I brew them to my taste. So yeah, that's kind of where I would focus on, is the traditional Germans and then the IPAs.
So when working through your schedule, how do you determine which styles you're going to brew true to style and which ones you're going to have a little imagination on?
The ones that people recognize are the ones that we pretty much try to stick as true to style as possible. So like the Hefeweizen, obviously our Golden Spiral, we try to emphasize that as being a traditional German style beer. So we want to make sure that we're using all German ingredients, using the right yeast, using the traditional techniques and everything, doing multi-step rests and everything to make it as true to style as possible. Where we get a little creative with that is more of your Americanized beers, where you start throwing fruit in there, you start throwing other adjuncts in there, you start getting into coffee and vanilla and whatever else. It's limitless as far as the possibilities of what you can create. Geez, I just wrote another 6 recipes in the last 2 days, so we're going to see how well those turn out. But it's one of those things. Take each individual thing on a basis, and who knows when inspiration's going to hit you.
Well, let's get back to this Tap Takeover. We have to throw a couple of special releases on there for the beer nerds, just to get them out of bed in the morning. What kind of special releases would you throw on that Tap Takeover?
Divine Sanctuary Chardonnay Barrel Age that we're drinking right now, maybe.
Yeah, we should let our listeners know we have a live tasting going on. These guys were nice enough to bring out a bottle of. This was a special release back in March.
Yeah, this was part of our anniversary party. So it was in March. It was middle of March. So it wasn't really lined up to be part of our anniversary party, but it just so happened to coincide that it came out for our anniversary party. So did a Heaven Hill Bourbon Barrel Age variation of it, and then also the Chardonnay Barrel Age variation of it too. We are going to be doing our Bootlegger's Mark again this year, but we're changing it up from an Imperial Stout to a barley wine. We're still going to stick to multiple different styles of casks that we're going to be aging it in. We actually just acquired some Calvados barrels from Europe, and then also some Spanish brandy barrels from Europe. So you'll definitely be seeing some of those beer styles coming out. Well, I'm sorry, beers aged in those barrels coming out in the near future. Like I said, we we do new beers every single Thursday. So, a special release of something on tap. I mean, world's your limit. I mean, the owner here, Chris, actually, he has a flourishing garden at his home. So, I mean, we've done everything from fresh sage, and we have a lemon balm saison that we're going to be doing for Firkin Fest. I mean, really, to tell you the truth, it's going to change every single week. So you never know what you're going to get. No offense.
You guys actually have 5 kind of series of beers that you put out. Traditional, Hop Wheel, the Brewers Reserve, Pilot Series, and then Barrel Series. How do you determine what goes into what?
I mean, I think it's pretty straightforward. Like the traditional series is going to be like your traditional, not necessarily German style, but it's going to be a little bit more true to style, true to historical accuracy. The Hop Wheel is going to be a little bit more hop forward. That's where Karl comes in with his juice packets and the rainbows and lollipops recipes. Those are big ones in the Hop Wheel series. Brewers Reserve. How do you describe the Brewers Reserve yourself? I mean, that's one you should feel.
That's pretty much something that doesn't fit into any other category. That's something, like I said, something that we brew for ourselves. I mean, everything from the Fou d'Amour, which means crazy in love. It literally is a Belgian-style ale with Szechuan peppercorns, star anise. I mean, a slew of different things in it, and it really doesn't fit into any particular category. So the Brewers
that
Reserve,
sounds crazy.
Yeah,
That's where we get weird.
The Brewers Reserve. I mean, everything from the strawberry tart. So I mean, your Berliner Weiss that has, once again, fresh pureed strawberry in it. I mean, it's a cross category. It's where we lump everything else.
So then, do a lot of your Thursday releases come out of the Pilot Series?
Primarily, I mean, we pilot batch beers just to develop the recipes, to find out if we need to manipulate a recipe, to try new ideas and everything else. I just brewed a Kartoffel beer that we'll release next week. So, I mean, a Kartoffel beer, if you're not familiar, is actually a potato beer. Yeah. Never had one before, and coming from German heritage, needless to say, I love potatoes and I love beer. So, mix them together. Hey, see what we come up with.
With the beers you release every Thursday, has any one of those turned into a beer you actually release regularly then?
Oh, absolutely. That's where juice packets and rainbows and lollipops.
Coming back to the Divine Sanctuary, tell our listeners what they're supposed to be tasting when they actually drink this beer.
Well, Divine Sanctuary it starts off as a 11.2% ABV. So it's made with a Belgian yeast, orange blossom honey. I mean, you get that very true Belgian characteristic, kind of candied sugar characteristic. But then we took that extra step and we aged it in fresh Chardonnay barrels. So you get the layers of the fresh fruit that come through on it, and a little hint of oakiness. We did blend multiple different barrels together in order to get that kind of balanced characteristic out of it. So I mean, you get everything from that very acidic fruity note all the way through the oak and everything else. So I mean, it's basically it's a flavor explosion. There's 100 different things you can taste.
It really is, and I agree with Mitch. The Chardonnay is like really shining through in this one too.
Mm-hmm. And you're not getting a ton of oat at all in this. I mean, you're getting more of that wine flavor than you do the barrel.
Yeah. You get the butteriness of the Chardonnay, though, which kind of helps round out the acidity and the fruitiness that comes from the beer itself.
Like I said, there's a flavor explosion. There's a difficult way to describe a beer. And I mean, you'll notice that when you're tasting a beer side by side with somebody else, where they have a different way of describing what they're tasting. I mean, but there's so many flavors going on in there. It's warming. It's a good beer.
So how does this compare and contrast from the bourbon barrel version?
The bourbon, once again, it imparts a much stronger barrel characteristic where you get that vanilla, the caramel, the oak, that straight bourbon characteristic that comes through. So, I mean, it almost adds a different layer of sweetness to it. It totally changes that base beer into, almost a cocktail, if you will. There's huge differences in regards to the fruitiness versus that sweet characteristic that you get from the bourbon.
And for your cellar agers, that one's going to be a little bit better just because you got dry Chardonnay here with this one. If you go and switch over to the sweet bourbon flavor that's added in the bourbon barrel version of it, that over time is going to dry out a little bit more, and it's going to change the characteristic, and it's going to maintain and develop a little bit more than what the Chardonnay one would.
This one's really nice. It's got a little berry on the nose, or a little grape, I guess, on the nose, and then it just lends itself really nicely to that Belgian ale. I think the Belgian was brilliant because it's really picking up those Chardonnay flavors. We had a beer like this, Jim, up in Green Bay.
Badger State, yeah.
Yeah, Badger State did one.
Very similar. The Golden Ale and a Chardonnay. They did both a Chardonnay version straight as well as Chardonnay with peaches, which we had, the Mega Blonde. That was definitely different from this. It's very interesting experience, both of these, where you got a lot more of the barrel in Badger States, where you get very little barrel in here, but you get a lot more Chardonnay coming through. So it's very interesting interesting to kind of get this different experience with almost a similar beer.
And it's just kind of fun to see this style becoming a more mainstream kind of style. Did you guys go into it thinking we need to kind of highlight some of our Belgian beers and barrel aging them as a way to do that, or was just kind of a happy accident, like throw something in a barrel and see what happens?
Well, let's just say this, that we did not necessarily plan that out. I mean, I personally love all styles of wine, Chardonnay being a key point there. But I mean, trying to find the right beer for the right barrel, you know. I mean, we're fortunate enough that we have access to all kinds of different barrels and everything. So, I mean, it's a matter of finding what's available for that beer. When I tasted this beer, initially I was like, Chardonnay would lend fantastic to it. So it was one of those things that, yeah, it wasn't just necessarily a happy accident. It was one of those things that we planned on using different styles of barrels, and we just kind of lucked out in regards to the fact that it's a fantastic beer.
So you have pretty easy access to barrels? You guys go through a broker, or you just have a guy?
We have connections. Once again, I've been in the industry for quite a while, and I know quite a few people in a lot of different places. So
there's a couple of back alley bourbon barrels that we've gotten our hands on.
Yeah.
Bought them from a guy's trunk and
So
Just happened to fall off the back of a truck.
yeah, if I'm gone for a weekend, that typically means that I just went down to some distillery somewhere into their back parking lot and threw the ski mask on and yep.
Shine distillery in the mountains.
Well, we got a little bit of your beer history, but we want to talk about specifically how you got involved with Fermentorium. Where were you in the beginning? Can you tell us a little bit about the owner, Christopher, and how you got involved?
He was an avid home brewer for well over a decade. Really got into it. Made ridiculous amounts of beer on a little 10-gallon system, just like we're using as our pilot system now. It wasn't that pilot system at the time. It's the classic craft beer, independent craft brewery story, where he was just a really passionate home brewer. You know, when you're sitting around the brew kettle, all of a sudden you start getting illusions of grandeur and decide that you're going to start your own brewery. And a matter of a few years later, he found this pet store here over on Highway 60 in Cedarburg, and he's like, that pet store could probably be a brewing company, and sure enough, we ended up turning this brewery right here or the pet store itself right into this brewery right here. So myself personally, I've always wanted to work for a brewing company. I've been trying to work for a brewing company for a very long time, starting out in home brewing with my dad when I was a kid, and then working my way up to working at a tap room when I was in my college years, then working for a distribution company for the last 3 years or so for getting my job here. So this is a dream come true for me.
That's interesting. So you've seen this from both ends. You've seen the distribution side and the brewing side.
All three ends.
Oh, wow.
Distribution side, the bar and retailer side, and the brewery side. Yep.
And I just want to point out, I think it's only in Wisconsin where fathers brew with their children.
Legally, you can drink underage with your parents in the state of Wisconsin. I will note on that.
That's true. Noble Roots had a very similar story.
So what about you, Karl? How long have you been involved? You've been here since the beginning, or?
Yeah, actually, to tell you the truth, I started here before we got our licensing and everything. I was I believe, third or fourth employee, which I am actually currently the longest standing employee minus the owner. But yeah, I mean, I originally was hired on as an assistant brewer just because of my carpentry skills and everything else. We were still in the matter of building the brewery at that point. We didn't have fermenters set. We didn't have the brew house set or anything else. So we literally were building it from the ground up. So, I mean, I was hired on just as basically a workhorse, and I had been an avid home brewer and everything. So, I mean, I had, access to different beer styles and everything, and then, kept developing them and came to the point that I just kind of showed enough initiative and showed enough, knowledge to actually develop into being head brewer. I definitely have come a long way, and I mean, I feel blessed that I've got to this point. I went through the paces. I guess, actually, to tell you the truth, I want to tell you a really quick story. It all started when I was 15 years old. I wrote my first Yahoo profile. I don't know if you guys remember, Yahoo had profiles before there was MySpace and Facebook and everything else like that. Yeah, Yahoo. So they asked occupation, and I was 15 years old. I didn't have an occupation at that point, so I tried to think of the coolest thing that I could. I wrote in there for occupation, professional beer taster. Ever since I wrote that in there, I'm like, I want to be a professional beer taster.
Hey,
so, I mean...
We're still applying for that job.
Right. Right. So, I mean, how do you develop yourself into getting into that position? I mean, there's no better way to do it than actually working for a brewery and making the beer yourself. I mean, I literally have to taste the beer that I'm sending out there. I have to know what I'm talking about. So I've kind of attained a dream that I've had for the majority of my life.
Coming up with juice packets didn't hurt either.
Yeah, exactly. Can you give us basically from concept to production to marketing? I mean, what's that process like for a beer like that?
What's that process like? Gosh, I don't know. Do you guys work for a brewery? Sometimes it just happens.
All right, cool.
Yeah.
We're going to go for a brewery.
All right, yeah.
Next topic.
Sometimes it just happens. Needless to say, I've brewed all kinds of different styles and everything. There are particular hops that I am really keen on, and I use those for a base for a lot of different things. But my boss was trying to make one of those cloudy North England style IPAs and whatnot. I'm like, well, you're using the wrong hops, you're using the wrong techniques and everything else. I mean, granted, juice packets is not super cloudy, but it is still unfiltered. It's just a matter of we aren't doing some of the ways that the other North England style IPAs are cheating. Not going to get into that part. It's true to style. It still sticks to the Reinheitsgebot. You know, any of those flavors that you're tasting in there are not any other additives. Once again, we're not going to get into all that stuff.
We'll get into that after the break.
Right. So developing a beer like that, I mean, like I said, it started as a pilot batch, and it was something that I wanted to try out. I knew how these hops work together, and I just threw it all together, wrote the recipe, and yeah, I mean, people liked it. I brewed it for myself, honestly. I'm just happy that other people like it.
Maybe Mitch, you can get in on this. How do you take that to market after you've made the beer? You've got this great concept. You've already made the beer. How do you get it into people's mouths afterwards?
It's unfortunate that we've gotten to the point, in a way, full circle, to the point that we have to market our beers in a way that is bright and flashy to sell them, because all of us craft beer drinkers long for the time where it was, we make good beer and that's why you should buy our good beer. And it's gone beyond that, unfortunately.
It's tough now because a lot of people are making great beer.
That's right.
And so there's, shelf space is very limited, and
which is a good thing, but there's a lot of bad beer that has a bright and flashy label on it that's selling just as well or better than some of the best craft beer that's out there that has a brown paper label that has the name of it written on with permanent marker, which doesn't happen too often anymore, but I mean, every once in a while. I don't think the TTP would like that too much if we did that at this point, but yeah, I mean, there's a decent amount of process involved. Like, obviously it all starts with tasting the beer and looking at it, which is definitely the most fun part, and from there you need to come up with a concept that fits the taste of the beer. At least here at the Fermentorium, that's what we like to do. We like to come up with a name and a description that very accurately describes the beer, or maybe it started out as an idea in our head and we changed it up. It just seemed to make sense with that particular beer, but yeah, from there we have a designer specifically that puts our labels together so that they seem like they're consistent between all of them, and we try not to get too aggressive with it to take away from the product itself.
Okay, well, we've got a new beer being poured for us for our live tasting. What's this one that you're pouring right now? This is the Rainbows and Lollipops. Okay.
And it happens to be National Lollipop Day, which just makes sense.
Oh my god, the kismet is strong.
So
right
this
now.
is the adult version of having a lollipop for us.
Describe the flavors for us. What are we going to be tasting in this American IPA?
Why don't you describe it? You're tasting it right now.
Well, it tastes like rainbows and lollipops, but I'm asking specifically. That's really good. This is a step above the juice packets. This is
there's a
little
ton
more
of fruit.
juicy. Yeah, it's like hop candy on the tongue a little bit. Almost like.
That's all the extra rainbows we put in there.
I definitely detect some malt sweetness in there. Did you add some additional crystal malts? Get that sweetness?
Not necessarily crystal malts.
No.
I mean, it's a fairly simple malt base. I believe there's 4 malts that are being used in it, but I mean, needless to say, every malt handles a little bit different, and some of them have more sugar base to them than others. Honestly, to tell you the truth, a very, like I said, simple malt build to it, but it's just meant to purvey the fruity characteristics of the hops that we're using in there. I mean, it's a very aggressively dry hop, though, too. I mean, I don't like to give away all of my secrets, but I
Give
mean...
away.
This is
Give it away now.
This is our gotcha journalism.
Okay. Well, let's just put it this way: that there's a lot of late edition hops in there. So I mean, you're talking about your Amarillos and your Azakas and everything else like that. So I mean, there's 5 different hops, I believe, that are actually used in the full recipe. So how
do the hops differ from the juice packets? Is it different hops? Is it just more of them?
It's definitely a higher IBU, and there is only one hop that is actually duplicated in the two recipes. So I mean, all of the rest of the hops in there, I mean, are totally different. So I mean, it's a totally different characteristic to it, but it's still sweet and very, once again, that kind of juicy style, but a little more rainbows, a little more lollipops in there.
Well, I think this is a perfect opportunity to take a little break. So cheers to rainbows and lollipops,
Cheers.
guys.
Cheers.
And we'll be back right after some beer news.
That's right.
Welcome to another edition of Beer News. This episode's easily accessible beer is Staghorn by New Glarus. 100% natural, great Midwest barleys, the world's most expensive hops, fresh yeast from Germany, and clear Wisconsin water make Staghorn Oktoberfest. You will find absolutely no additives, preservatives, or artificial agents of any kind in this beer. Staghorn is brewed using time-honored methods to release the smooth flavor of roasted malts and combines a smooth amber body with a clean, crisp finish. For beer releases, for the first time ever, Great Lakes Brewing Company is proud to announce the release of dark, smoky, and deliciously complex barrel-aged Imperial smoked porter. Their newest barrel-aged brew, perfect for the chillier days ahead. Bold and robust, with rich chocolate and coffee aromas, a subtle, smoky flavor, and a sweet finish. Aged in bourbon barrels, it has an ABV of 8.5% and IBUs of 50. Pairs well with barbecued ribs, aged Gouda, and chocolate desserts. Third Space recently celebrated its 1-year anniversary by releasing You've Said It All, a uniquely Wisconsin IPA. The beer showcases the flavors of 4 varieties of hops. Galaxy, an Australian hops with big juicy tropical flavors. Denali, a Yakima Valley hops that provides high notes of pineapple and accents for both Simcoe and Cascade hops, which provide a backbone of citrus, pine, and floral notes. Distinct Wisconsin ingredients like corn, wheat, and lactose and non-fermentable sugars offers up a subtle sweetness and creamy body without adding heaviness. Looking to the end of October, Third Space plans to release a bourbon and rum barrel-aged candy bar porter that's yet to be named. This release is scheduled for Halloween night. In brewery news, amidst the ever-changing landscape in the craft beer industry, Stone Brewing announced its triumphant presence in all 50 states, achieved while maintaining fierce independence alongside its distribution partners and steadfast fans. Stone Beers will hit bars, restaurants, and retailers throughout West Virginia beginning this week, completing Stone's 50-state charge to bring its original West Coast-style beers to hop lovers across the country. Our goal has always been to deliver bold and fresh hop-forward beers to as many fans as possible. We've just conquered one major milestone in doing so, said Dominic Ingalls, Stone Brewing CEO. With so many options for high-quality craft beer in every state, it's an honor to see such a demand for our beers across the entire country. Now that we're here, our commitment to fans nationwide is to remain truly independent and to continue to deliver innovative and fresh Stone beers. For upcoming festivals, September 29th marks the start of the annual Milwaukee Oktoberfest, happening 2 weekends this year at Pierre Marquette Park in downtown Milwaukee. There will be a ceremonial keg tapping at 5:30 p.m. on Friday, September 29th for free beer. The event will also include polka music, Miss Oktoberfest competitions, Stein hosting competition, Milwaukee's largest cornhole tournament, beer brats, and more. This event, which spans 2 weekends, is free for everyone to enjoy. Saturday, October 7th at Schlitz Park is the Milwaukee Cider and Nano Brewery Festival. Enjoy unlimited 3-ounce samples from some of the best hard ciders and craft beers from the Milwaukee, Wisconsin, and beyond. The Cider, Nano, and Beer Fest offers the perfect environment to explore new styles and find your next favorite cider or small batch craft beer. Enjoy unlimited samplings, over 70 ciders and nano brews, live entertainment from the Extra Crispy Brass brand, and a commemorative tasting glass. And this has been Beer News.
That's right.
And welcome back. Thank you again, Andy, for a very insightful beer news. We appreciate it every time. We are out here in Cedarburg, Wisconsin, a rural suburb of Milwaukee, but we're outside of Lake Michigan water. So for those folks that don't know, Lake Michigan, as well as all the Great Lakes, have a very tight control over the water that you can bring in and out. So out here, Fermentorium had to dig a well, which leads to certain challenges. What were some of those challenges that you had to overcome?
Gosh, I'm glad I didn't have to dig our well by hand. I mean, for one, that would have been a heck of a challenge. Needless to say, you get different water everywhere in the world. Different water has different balances as far as the minerals and the salts and everything that are actually in the water themselves. One of the biggest challenges that we had was using regular well water would be fine for a lot of people. We kind of went off of that path. We decided that we would put in a very efficient filtration system. So we run our well water through a filter, back through a reverse osmosis system, through a UV light treatment system, and we basically take the water back down to nothing. So we basically take it just to straight H2O. And then from there, we can create our own customized water profiles, and basically make any kind of style of beer from anywhere around the world, adding the minerals and the salts back into the water. So, I mean, it's a pretty cool situation that we're working out with, that we can match literally any global water profile just by adding those things back to it.
Yeah, that's absolutely very cool. I mean, you guys are focusing on traditional styles, being very true, and then being able to be a Burton-on-Trent or a Czech Pils, being all these different styles of beer that were very focused on the water available to them. But did I not see a plane land across the street? I mean, before we started recording, what is up with that?
I'm surprised you saw that through all of the corn stalks. We actually, there's a giant cornfield across the street, and it's kind of hidden in there, but there is a landing strip, and there's a small airport that's typically used for crop dusting and everything else. So, I mean, it's a municipal airport right across the street. It's interesting being in rural Wisconsin, I guess.
So recently the Fermentorium has added a canning line, and you guys are the first brewery in the state of Wisconsin to add the Brewers Association craft beer label. How do you think that's going to go for you guys?
Well, and not only that, but you guys were originally 22-ounce bottle producers. So what has that been like going from the 22-ounce bottles to the cans?
That's definitely a Karl question, because he was one of the guys that was hand filling, 4 at a time, those 22-ounce bottles, comparatively to the canning process that we went through. We did our first canning line run less than a week ago, exactly a week ago for that matter. That was quite a bit more efficient than the system that I saw you guys using before that.
Cans are just more versatile, I guess. You can basically take a can anywhere. They fit better in a koozie than a 22-ounce bottle. You know, all kinds of good things that come along with cans. The 22-ounce bottles was just because that's the equipment that was available to us at the time. We purchased the canner. We had it custom fabricated for us by Wild Goose a while ago. Love the Wild Goose guys. Those guys do a fantastic job. Got to plug them a little bit. Honestly, to tell you the truth, I think it was a no-brainer as far as switching from a 22-ounce format to a 4-pack 16-ounce format. It brings the price point down, brings our overall cost down, and we can get more beer out further than we could with those 22-ounce bottles. And you're kind of limited with those 22-ounce bottles, though, also. I mean, as far as for everything from storage and the beer styles that you put into them. I mean, you're not going to put a 5% alcohol beer into a 22-ounce format and expect to get $10 for it. Whereas you can take that same beer and put it into a 16-ounce format, sell it in a 4-pack, and have people pay less than $10 for that 4-pack of 16-ounce beers. I mean, it's a logical choice, and I think that it was definitely the wise choice. The thing that, I mean, a lot of small craft brewers are going towards just because it's economical.
The negative stigma to cans is quickly disappearing, too. There was a negative stigma probably because of the huge breweries that existed before the craft beer movement really happened. They were all canning their beer, and it had this connotation to it that people thought was negative, that it meant that you had a cheap beer there. But in reality, it does a couple things. Most importantly is that it doesn't allow light penetration to go through it, so the beer lasts a little bit longer. Thank you for that, Karl. He did just open a can, obviously.
The live tasting continues.
And secondly, it's actually more economical and a little bit more green, just because a can weighs a heck of a lot less than a bottle does. So your shipping costs go down, and therefore you're using less gas, less fossil fuels for it, and it's actually more economical and green to be using a can than it is to be using a bottle.
Well, not just that, but it also keeps out the light. You know, it keeps out any of the oxygen. It's just a great container. And
Fresher,
like you said, since Oscar Blues started going towards it, and
Right.
the craft industry is just heading in that direction, and it's kind of been a fun thing.
What does being the first brewery in the state of Wisconsin to represent the Brewers Association symbol on your cans mean to you guys?
I'm just proud.
The independent craft brewers logo, it kind of represents who we are. We never wanted to be anything besides following our passions, doing what we want, making beer for us and everybody else around us, and just making quality beer. I guess that independent logo really it showcases who we are. I mean, we're not gonna be those guys that all of a sudden 2 or 3 years down the line, and all of a sudden we're huge and we have this cult following and everything else and high trade values, whatever. I mean, that's not exactly who we are. I mean, we started this business as a passion. That's what we want to continue to. I mean, that's what we strive for. And really, to tell you the truth, I've been waiting to be in this position my entire life, and I don't want to squander it and just be unhappy and then regretting something that I had made the decision of. I mean, geez, it literally is something that we stand for. A lot of people don't necessarily agree that, oh, well, you have to separate yourself by having that logo on there and being like showcasing the fact that you're independent. No, it's not that. I mean, what we're talking about is the fact that we are independent currently, and we plan on being independent for the duration of however long we can ride this dream, you know? That's really what it's about.
It's been increasingly difficult to separate David and Goliath. Goliath has been hiding behind a mask, a little bit more increasingly so. And what this is to us is labeling that mask and showing this mask is invisible. You understand exactly who is David and who is Goliath, who the small brewers are that are pouring their heart out into a product that they absolutely love, that they're absolutely passionate about, and who is just owned by enormous company that just wants to be hiding behind the mask of David and continuing to make beer and sell more beer and drown out the little man. So it's very important to us.
Excellent. So currently the state budget still hasn't been finalized. Have you guys heard anything? What is your take on the proposed bill that they're thinking about slipping in at the end of it?
We will not exist anymore if that bill gets passed, period. We're done.
Taproom revenue, I mean, really, honestly, we're not trying to impede on any of the taverns or the local pubs or anything along those lines. Honestly, we want them to be our friends. I've worked in that industry for a large portion of my career. Really, I mean, they really are my friends. And I think that wholly those people don't want to see the decimation of the craft brewers. It's all a big community, and I don't think that too much conflict between us. It's just a matter of the fact that I think it's really been blown out of proportion. And I'm positive that bill will not pass through the way that it's currently slated. I'm not entirely too worried about it. It's kind of BS. All in a whole.
There's very few breweries that will survive in the state of Wisconsin if that bill passes, though. And we do need to emphasize how important that is to us. But yeah, we're here to work with bars, not against them, that's for sure.
And as we've told our listeners, make sure to call your legislators, let them know that this is, if you love craft brewing in Milwaukee and Wisconsin and outside of the major areas, if you love craft brewing, you need to support your craft brewers. And this is especially your independent craft brewers. These are the guys that are going to be affected by this law. So we've come out and said, for all of our listeners, make sure that you're against this. This is absolute craziness.
Yeah, because there's been some states, Texas that we've been talking about, have passed this law. They've been affected. You've seen kind of a reduction or a cap now placed on breweries that can no longer grow, because they're no longer able to have their own tap room to put their own beer in. And retail spaces, they have the opportunity to explore a great number of breweries. This is an exciting time right now. The Fermentorium itself has guest taps on. I mean, why do you guys do that?
Once again, we're a community. I mean, it's they're friends of ours. People that we've gone through the paces with. People that we can share the same struggles with and everything else. I mean, it's not like it's easy street just because we're making craft beer. People are like, oh, well, you're like a pseudo-famous person. Yeah, well, not necessarily. I mean, famous in a certain industry, but just do it, Mitch. Honestly, to tell you the truth, it's more about the passion. That's all. I mean, really, we share so many similarities with those people from the other breweries, and we're not the only ones that make beer, and we're not the only ones that make good beer. I like to call our beer good. Some people call it great. Some people call it swill. Whatever. You have your own opinion, I mean, we're not making it for everyone. We're making it for the people that like these styles of beer, and hopefully they take us as that.
And speaking of people who like beer, I think we have a listener question from somebody who loves his beer, Jim.
Yep, he's a local here in the North Shore. Mr. Greg Grandinetti is wondering, when you decided to start distributing beers, because you can and bottle, how did you determine if you wanted to self-distribute or work with a wholesaler?
Once again, I guess it's going to be the size of your britches. Having additional staffing and, encountering certain costs when you're talking about distribution, you're dealing with everything from, your salespeople and your logistics and everything else along those lines. It comes into play where you find the bubble. if you will. You can self-distribute as long as you can, and honestly, you're going to make a higher price point as far as for return, but you also have a ton more overhead. So, I mean, you're really, when you're dealing with the craft beer, whether it's a distributor or self-distribution, all you're trying to do is just get your money back, honestly. I mean, it costs a lot for the actual production, for the ingredients, for the actual, basically just making the beer itself, trying to get that going. It's not a matter of, oh, are we going to get rich and famous? No, it's a matter of how are we going to get our beer out and just get recognized and, you know, try to make it so that we can keep our heads over the water. I mean, there's so many times that you're just sitting there talking about, well, we need this equipment, we need that equipment, we need so many things, and none of it comes easy, but I mean, it's one of those things that you go through those growing pains, and we're constantly evolving, and we're constantly just trying to keep our heads above the water. I mean, one of the great things that we just did was putting that canner in. That gives us a larger distribution reach, gives us the availability to get into more drinkers, you know, mouths, you know. That sounded kind of weird the way I said that, but it's just a matter of constantly evolving and constantly just trying to drive yourself and drive the market before the market drives you.
And there is something to be said for a four pack rather than a 22-ounce bottle, because some people don't necessarily want to open a 22-ounce bottle and have to drink the entire thing. But you open a 4-pack, you get to drink one can, and then you got 3 more sitting in the fridge for you. So right. It's a different market, it's a different model, and you know, absolutely, there's definitely a market for both.
Totally. I didn't hear you guys complaining when we opened that Rainbows and Lollipops or that Divine Sanctuary. But.
Not a bit.
We got one more listener question. Actually, piggybacks on what Jim was saying. Scott from Grafton sent in this email. It's actually a two-parter. What are your ultimate plans for expansion, and will you grow with kind of reducing your lineup? Because he's very aware of what you guys do. Would you continue your growth with the smaller batches? Basically, how do you guys think you're going to grow?
Well, that's a darn good question. You kind of have to develop on the fly. I mean, as far as for our current expansion, yes. I mean, we would love to add more fermenters. We would love to brew more beer, more styles all the time. We would love to do everything that, you know, we want to do. We're currently plumbed up for 6 more fermenters. So, I mean, we can expand anytime that we have that money. So please just buy more beer so that we can buy more fermenters. Yeah, I guess as far as for doing the different styles and everything, I mean, we're never going to stop that pilot program. We're constantly going to be elaborating on different ideas of what beer can be and what beer currently is and what beer should be and everything else. Really, as far as... God, you're just doing it for effect.
So going off, you guys actually have some of the most interesting beer names. A lot of places, I'm not going to say there's a certain brewery.
Jim, I told you not to ask me about this.
So there's a certain brewery in Milwaukee that calls their beer just by the style. But you guys, you go over the top with your names. How do you come up with them?
Kind of randomization. I don't know if you've ever been on chat roulette before. No, I'm kidding. You should probably delete that, by the way.
Tell us all about your chat roulette.
No, that's staying.
No, so we started out actually naming our beers based off of everybody at the brewery coming up with a couple of different names and everything. We just drew them all out on the dry erase board, and then we would go through a cycle of everybody gets to erase one, and then all of a sudden you're stuck with the last 4 names that are left, and then they went into a think tank, if you will. So there was a group of close personal friends that we would send those name choices to, and yeah, so I mean it wasn't really just like, hey, we're naming it this. Never would it ever be that simple. Otherwise we would have had Sexy Thumb out already, which I still think is a great name.
That is a great name.
Yeah, Sexy Thumb is going to be a beer that will be produced at some point. Mitch, keep your thumbs to yourself. As far as for the beer names, some of them are just immediate. It's like, yes, that's the name. That's what it's going to be.
Like Juice Pack.
Juice Packets was never once debated. I mean, it's a juicy style beer. I mean, it doesn't have, you know, a whole lot of that bitter hop characteristic to it. It's very juicy. You get a lot of citrus character out of it and everything else. I mean, it's damn juice bomb.
What events are you guys holding here for the rest of the year? I mean,
that's a Mitch question.
It is a Mitch question. So we just started a new series of events called Limitless Grains. And the whole concept is that beer is just the ultimate pairing tool. It's really universal. It can pair with absolutely anything. The beautiful thing about it is you have all of these different flavors that you can get out of the grains. You can get all these different flavors out of the yeast. The hops have such a variety of flavors themselves. It's literally a drink that can be paired with absolutely anything. And we don't want to stop just at food either. We want to go beyond that. We want to do something that's never been done before. Currently, right now, we have a few events in line with us in the Limitless Grain series that include a tasting with Emmy Roth, which is the cheese maker out of Monroe, Wisconsin originally, that made the best cheese in the world last year. It was actually won the world cheese competition. Their Sarchois was named the best cheese in the world. So we have Claire Menk, PhD and corporate chef of Emmy Roth, coming in here to guest speak on behalf of the cheese itself. We've got a sundae and beer pairing with Purple Door ice cream and Sweet Trio chocolate. That's coming up on the 30th. We're actually going to pair beer with ice cream with these ice cream sundaes. There's a company in Cedarburg here called Cedarburg Popcorn Company that's getting really weird with their styles of popcorn. They have a banana pudding flavored popcorn in particular that I'd really like to pair a beer with. We've got an event with them, a beer and popcorn pairing coming up for Brewery Week on the 4th of August. Tom Schwei of Schwei Sausages here in Cedarburg, Wisconsin. He's making some of the best sausages I've ever tasted in my life. Their hot Hungarian sausage changed my life, to say the least. We're pairing up some sausages with him on September the 9th. And then we got a beer and goat cheese pairing on September 29th with LeClaire Farms, which is an award-winning goat cheese maker. And word on the street is that Chris, our owner, is bringing in his pet goat Peanut to guest speak on the behalf of the goat's milk. So that'll be definitely an event for the books.
As a brewery, what are your challenges for the upcoming year?
It's all about maintenance. I mean, it's one of those things that you don't know what to expect. It's market driven. It's literally just a matter of structured expansion along with maintaining the same quality and the same ideals that we've always been running with.
It's actually a really good way to approach beer. I really appreciate the way that you guys are approaching beer, which is to say we're growing organically. We're throwing things out there and then seeing what catches on, rather than some breweries which just say, hey, here are our 5 styles and you're going to like them. That's a very arrogant way to start a brewery, I would say.
I don't think that it's necessarily that here are the 5 styles. I think that it's, once again, market driven. I mean, there's proven market strategy as far as for what styles sell the best. You can throw out those 5 basic styles, essentially expect results. Just because it says IPA on it, just because it says amber, just because it says Pilsner, or whatever the case is, you're going to find those drinkers. You're constantly going to be able to actually get somebody to try it, but it's not a matter of getting somebody to try it, it's a matter of getting somebody to drink it and enjoy it and try it again and try it again and try it again. I mean, kind of like me and Juice Packets. I'm sorry, me and Juice Packets have an unspoken relationship where I don't think that I can really necessarily elaborate.
Kind of Juice Packets' father, so.
So I made a pilot batch of juicier packets.
Oh,
I remember that.
That was a real thing.
Tell us about
Juicier
that.
packets actually elaborated into rainbows and lollipops.
Okay.
So, I mean, I had to restructure the entire recipe and everything. And actually, when we brewed Rainbows and Lollipops, it was not a proven recipe. It was one of those things that literally just kind of developed. It was a matter of the things that we liked out of the juice packets, the things that we liked out of the juicier packets, and made it into something totally different. I mean, the grain bill and the hop bill totally got restructured and changed, and it is what it is. I hate that phrase.
As we wrap up here, I just want to kind of go a little bit off topic because, frankly, there's an issue that I have. One of the most underrated films in all of cinematic history is Ghostbusters 2. It's a tragedy, frankly. Yet, when I come here to the Fermentorium, I have the visage of Vigo staring over me.
So how does one procure a Carpathian for one's wall leading into a bathroom?
Well, you don't procure it, it chooses you.
I mean, you haven't seen the movie?
We do not have a river of slime.
That was the next question.
We might open a souring facility, in which case we will definitely have a river of slime. Yeah, how do you procure a Carpathian? You have to ask the Carpathians for a Carpathian, and then just a Carpathian shows up unannounced, and just, yeah, he's there. Vigo is a firm structure in this building, and he's kind of what we all use as a brace. When life gets to us, we go to Vigo. We ask Vigo what's happening.
All right, getting back to beer. One thing that we always talk about is aging beers. What do you guys think about aging beers, and what's in your cellar right now as far as what are you aging right now?
Me personally, like
Well,
in my own
both
stash,
of you guys, yeah, personally.
I could go on and on. I mean, there's the typical ones that everyone ages, like
Dark Lord.
Bourbon County, maybe a little Dark Lord. I've gotten my hands on some Dark Lord too. I'm all about aging my own homebrews as much as I possibly can. I make
terrible, Mitch.
I make sure that I've got CO2 in the bottle itself before I age them there, and I've got a bourbon barrel at home, and I've got a rye whiskey barrel at home, and I've got a souring barrel that used to be a straight bourbon barrel at home, and put that stuff in bottles, and I just let them sit. But beyond that, I think one of my favorite beers of all time, certainly one of my favorite breweries of all time, from here in Wisconsin, is Black Husky Brewing Company, and their 12-Dog Imperial Stout is phenomenal. And their 12-Dog Bourbon Barrel Imperial Stout that they made 3 years back came off the line a little bit hot, but it's delicious now, and I've got a few bottles of that left.
Oh, so you've been aging that for the 3 years and just trying it now, or
at least
have you
3
been
years.
have you been trying
might be
it
4
each
at this
year
Oh, for
as
sure.
it goes, and kind of monitoring the transition for it?
For sure. And I mean, that's a brewery that if you want to get your hands on their beer, you're talking about back then, not necessarily anymore. They've got a 10-barrel system or in downtown Milwaukee, but back then they were brewing out of a log cabin that was hand-built in their backyard in the north woods of Wisconsin and hand-delivering it down here to us. So I got it during that time. Just the context behind the beer is just as fun as the beer itself is on the inside of the bottle. So
I'm sorry, Jesus, can you repeat the question?
What are your thoughts on aging beers, personally, and what's in your cellar right now?
Thoughts on aging beers? Jeez.
It's been a little controversial on the podcast.
well,
We've got some brewers who say the beer is ready to go as soon as we release it, and then we have other brewers who say age it. Russ Klisch and Lakefront is kind of, and Mobcraft and some other breweries have come up with this little symbol, the hourglass symbol, to say this is an age-worthy beer. You should definitely throw it in your cellar for a bit. And then we've got Half Acre, who we talked to, who said no, this is ready to go.
Gosh, I guess.
don't age IPAs first off.
Well, no kid, yeah.
Yeah, we're talking about anything over
I wish it
8%. 8% plus we say is about ageable.
With how much juice packets I drink, I mean, all the beer that I have at home is just sitting there. Jeez. As far as for ageable beers, I want to do this a couple of different ways. One thing, Tyranina, love the brewery. Their barrel-aged series beers, fantastic. Drink them fresh. I've definitely done verticals of them and everything else, and love Tyranina's barrel aging series. But that is true to, like you were saying, where the beer is coming to you and drink it when you get it. There's certain other beers that, once again, they come out a little hot, like Mitch was saying, where you kind of need to let them mellow out a little bit. Sometimes they don't mellow out the way that you thought that they were going to. So you really kind of just got to play each beer. Each beer is individualized. I mean, they're a different person. You don't know how the conversation's going. Gosh, yeah. But yeah, no, what do I have in my cellar? I guess we'll get into that. Jeez. I think I still have some 2004 old school barley wine sitting in there.
Okay. Some Sierra Nevada, or what are you talking?
No, old school barley wine from Dogfish Head.
Oh, okay.
I mean, that was a solid beer. I mean, there's a lot of big ass beers, I had to grab, racking for all the cases of beer that I had. I had a little bit of an issue at one point in my life where I just kept buying beer and buying more beer and buying more beer. Thank goodness I learned how to consume that beer, so I'm working my way through it. I guess as far as for the beers that I would cellar at this point, it's typically going to be my sours, my Imperial Stouts, my barrel-aged beers, and that sort of thing. And I would definitely give the advice that, if you're in the position to buy a couple of a particular beer, buy a couple, for sure. Try some fresh. If it's on tap fresh, drink it then, and then just let some sit around for a while. Always use the right cellaring conditions. Make sure that you're storing your beers upright, and unless they have a cork and cage and everything, in which case you can store them on their side, la-da-da-da-da. Proper cellar temps, all that other good stuff, the straightforward things that you probably should already know. And if you don't know that, then just drink that beer that you were storing improperly quick and go buy more beer.
To be short, it just like Lakefront and Mobcraft was saying, it depends on the beer.
Totally. totally.
Totally depends on the beer.
It's definitely not an IPA, but what do you think of the 120? Dogfish had 120. We've actually tried something that's laid down for 5 to 6 years.
I'm not aware on whether or not I've tried that fresh before because of how long that beer usually sits around before it sells to us. Like we get our hands on it. I did not get. It was so popular when it came back in the state. Dogfish Head came into the state of Wisconsin, and then they pulled out because we were drinking way too much of their beer. So a few years down the line, they came back into the state of Wisconsin, and they brought some 120-minute with them, and everybody wanted that all at the same time. And then that started to slow down, and it was a little bit easier to find 120-minute finally. And I'm not quite convinced that I've tasted a really fresh 120-minute before because of that. Because a lot of them not only sit on the shelf, but most of them that are sitting on the shelf are sitting on the warm shelf. And that is not good for an IPA, no matter how much alcohol is in it.
I don't know what liquor stores you go to, but most liquor stores I go to don't have 120 just sitting on the shelf.
I worked for a distribution company
Yes,
for an extended period of time, and that's just not true.
And also, if you go to the liquor store and you see the 120 on the shelf, it doesn't mean at the warehouse. It wasn't
That's
just
right.
sitting on the shelf. All right, well, I think this is a great time to wrap it up, guys. Thank you so much for being here. Do you guys have any other plugs that you'd like to get, any shout-outs that you'd like to give out?
Just that we got new cans, man. We're excited about the cans, and
Hit up those
we
cans.
and we
Hit
hope
up.
you guys enjoy them too. Yeah, they're gonna be fresh. We're gonna make sure that we keep them fresh on the shelf, and hope you love them. We hope you bring them out on your pontoon boat in the Wisconsin lakes, and just have a great time.
Well, you've heard the cans popping as we've been going through the second half of the podcast, so it's a fresh sound. It's a very fresh sound.
And just give our listeners your hours of operation out here. When are you guys open throughout the week?
We actually just started new hours on Fridays specifically that I'd like to say. We're open at 12 o'clock on Fridays. We're open at 12 o'clock on Saturdays. We're open at 12 o'clock on Sundays.
Don't question me, Mitch. We're
And
closed on Monday.
During the week, other than Mondays, we're open at 4 o'clock, and every day we're open until at least 10 o'clock. Depending on if we got a good crowd in here, we might stay open a little bit later for you guys.
But as a production brewery, you don't serve food, but you're free to bring it in, correct?
That's a very good question,
That is a
Jim.
phenomenal
I appreciate
question,
you
as a
asking
matter
me
of
that.
fact. Thanks for bringing that
This
up.
As we
segment
wrap
just got
up.
about 30 minutes longer, so we
Shall we
just
go
got
into
our
detail?
state approval on our food service licensing, and we'll actually start serving our own food as of next week. So just
snacky
another draw
snacks.
to hopefully keep people drinking our beers and enjoying our food. The menu is going to be very simple once again. Initially, we'll be elaborating it. We definitely have a game plan for it. As far as for what we're launching immediately, well, just come in and find out what we have on the menu. I guess that'd probably be your best bet. Once again,
talking-
closed Mondays, open 4 to 10, Tuesday through Thursday, Friday and Saturday from noon until 10. Mitch, by the way, you suck at the hours thing. And Sundays from noon until 6. I hope to see you soon. I mean, maybe you'll even see me or Mitch hanging around here. Who knows?
Yeah, and if you see these guys, make sure to say hi. If you see the Tap Takeover Podcast boys in the brewery, make sure to say hi to us too. By the time this podcast airs, you guys will have fresh food in your brewery, and we're really excited for that. I just want to say thank you guys for sitting down with us. This has been an amazing interview. We've tried so many beers. You've heard the cans opening. For us, for me, for Alex,
Jesus?
Andy?
Jim,
Mitch,
And Carl.
thank you guys for joining us.
thanks for having us.
Cheers.
cheers.
Cheers, guys.
All right, awesome interview. Man, Mitch and Karl those guys were just awesome. I love talking with those guys. Really fun. Awesome things about the brewery. I just definitely, everybody get out there, check it out. It was a good time.
Yeah, what a fantastic group of brewers they have
Yeah.
there. I was impressed with every single person I met.
Except for Sparky.
Sparky, if you're listening, we love you.
Your bosses don't, but we do. But let's get into the beer here we're tasting. The Bourbon Barrel Aged Divine Sanctuary. It's a Bourbon Barrel Aged Belgian Style Ale. This is a unique one. It's
See, now I was really interested to try this one because we were able to drink the Chardonnay barrel aged one in the interview with the brewers, and that one was fantastic. The barrel really added something to that beer. So what are you guys getting out of this one?
well, I do like it. It's a little high in alcohol, my taste, but I don't know if the bourbon barrel really added much to it. I guess, what do you think, Jim?
Yeah, for me, this is kind of a miss. It is hot at 11.2, but the bourbon barrel aging on this misses the mark for me. Again, going to the Chardonnay, it had this great kind of Riesling flavoring to the golden ale. The flavors are muddled. I don't know what I'm supposed to be experiencing here. I'm getting a lot of dryness, some weird bourbonness, some weird Belgian flavors. It's just not harmonious at all for me.
See, I love Belgian beers, but I don't think golden ales are meant to be put into bourbon barrels. I agree with Jim. It's a complete and utter miss for me on this one.
And I'll be honest, this has been laying down in my cellar since about April. So it very well might be the case of this is a beer that shouldn't have gotten laid down. But I will say that the Chardonnay barrel one that I laid down ended up being very, very good after all this time. And we drank the Chardonnay barrel one in the actual interview, not too long ago. So that one had been laid down at the brewery as well. So it really does seem like this one may have just been a miss.
So what were you guys expecting with the bourbon barrel?
I actually didn't really know what to expect. I guess a sweet whiskey flavor, perhaps, to have the golden ale kind of highlight the maltiness of the whiskey. Though I'm guessing bourbon may have been the wrong thing. Perhaps a scotch may have been better for this. I don't know, but it's muddled.
So are we saying basically we love complexity, but too complex, right?
It is a little too complex for a golden ale. And I mean, at 11.2, there shouldn't be any issues with laying it down. We did drink another Chardonnay barrel for the video, last week. That was
and that turned out great.
And maybe it should have been. We've had some success at. You remember when we did the Badger State episode, right? They had a Chardonnay barreled version of their Belgian and also a Cabernet barrel version. And I thought that was a really nice contrast in barrels and in great flavors. And I thought that one really translated well. Yeah, this one it's a bit of a miss. So to go bourbon barrel and Chardonnay barrel, maybe next time 2 different wine barrels, because the wine really seems to speak through the barrel into these golden ales. I would still say that most of their beer was fantastic. The IPAs at Fermentorium are fantastic. The lollipops and rainbows was amazing. That one really blew my top off. General impressions of the brewery, did you guys walk away with?
By all means, every brewery is going to have a miss every once in a while. Don't let that discourage you from visiting the Fermentorium, because the majority of the beers we had there were great.
What's the one thing I really like about the Fermentorium? They're not afraid to take risks. They produce a new beer every week. Some of them are really good. Some of them miss the mark. But they're trying new things with different adjuncts, different styles. So I like it. Not everything's going to be a hit. And nor should it be. No one's ever going to bat 1,000, right?
But they're swinging for the fences.
Being that innovative to win Firkin Fest 2 years in a row, too.
Yeah, they're doing a bunch of stuff right, and it's one of those places that makes me want to wish I was like a local there, because it's a really cool vibe. They got the new releases every Thursday. I think it's just a cool place. Definitely check it out.
Yeah, and Andy, like you said, they won one of our very favorite beer festivals, Firkin Fest. They won it 2 years in a row. Best Firkin, favorite Firkin. That's a hell of an accomplishment. So hey, let's cheers to the Fermentorium here.
Cheers, guys.
Cheers.
And I believe that is going to do it for us, because we have no more beer. So for me, for Alex,
for Andy,
I'm Jim.
Jesus.
That's going to do it. Thank you for joining us on the Tap Takeover Podcast, a solid non-fail production.
No.